Thank you very much, Melissa, for the introduction, and also I would like to pay my deep respects to the traditional owners of the land that we're gathering on today, and thank you, Rhonda, very much for your warm welcome to the land, and also to WIPAN for thinking of me and for inviting me to be here. I feel really privileged to have the opportunity to launch this really important discussion paper. As most of you know in the room, the origins of WIPAN were at the Sisters Inside conference, which was held in Darwin, a place which is very dear to my heart. I worked up there for over 5 years as a community lawyer. And there was this very, very powerful conference that was organised by Sisters Inside in 2007. I just want to get a sense of how many of you were actually there at that conference. It's a few of you, a very small few of you. I actually was there as well. Nikki and I just said to Nikki, did you know I was there? And she said, you must have been hanging out with a different mob, and I was. But it was a very powerful event. One of the things that I know is at the heart of the ethos of WIPAN is that it is driven by women with the lived experience of having been in prison. And of course, this is a really powerful ethos for Sisters Inside. And that conference was absolutely the embodiment of that, where so many of the voices was led by, it was controlled by, it was driven by women who have the lived experience of being in prison. It was a very powerful conference on a number of levels. It was held, I think, just 2 weeks after the announcement by the Howard government of the Northern Territory intervention. So I can tell you that the mood in that room was one of outrage, of deep distress, but also I was so inspired by the strength of the women's leadership in that room. Women from the north who have been at the front line for years saying we need to do things differently, who were deeply offended by how they had not been asked and they had not been listened to. And so the mood of that room over the course of those days, I think, had a lot of inspiration in it and determination in the room. One of the other most powerful memories I have of that conference was sitting in the front bar of the hotel where that conference was held. There was a large group of us gathered, all conference participants, and about, I don't know when this happened, whether you were there, but about 9 o'clock we got moved on. We got moved on by the hotel administration. Because we were a group of women, mostly women who had the lived experience of having been in prison, and they just didn't like us. Well, you know what? I don't think they knew what they had done, because that conference was full of lawyers. And at the time, I happened to be working at the Australian Human Rights Commission, which deals with complaints about discrimination. So within the course of moments, we had organised a complaint, we had it lodged, and we were treated so beautifully for the rest of that conference. Again, I think it was one of those times where, you know what, when women come together with determination, we can change the world into the way that it should be, rather than the way it is. So again, I'm really so inspired and just thrilled to be here at such a crucial time in the ongoing history of WIPAN and the very important work that you do. 6 years after that powerful conference in Darwin to help you to launch this very, very important discussion paper. Whilst the Northern Territory intervention continues, your existence shows that some things do change and there can be improvement with determination. But we have to always be vigilant and to continue to engage with decision makers who have the capacity to support and to empower and to help liberate, or they can have the capacity to defeat and to stand in as blockages for the really important work that women through this network are continuing to do today. So I want to just talk very briefly about the discussion paper itself. I was absolutely delighted to see that the discussion paper is underpinned by a human rights-based framework. It is a rights-based document, as it should be. In the Australian context, talking about human rights is not always seen as the most effective way of advocating, but in my view, it continues to be one of the most important things that we should continue to speak up about. The origin of human rights came out of the Second World War and the Holocaust. It came out of a determination of the global community at that time to ensure that every person, regardless of where you live, you will be treated with dignity and respect, and that government has the responsibility to ensure that that is right, that is what happens. And one of the international human rights standards is about the right to adequate, safe and secure housing. It is a human right. And this report makes that very, very clear. But as the discussion paper evidences, again, women prisoners, women with the lived experience of being in prison and having come post-release in New South Wales overwhelmingly do not enjoy that basic fundamental human right. Housing and the lack of secure housing for women is clearly at the heart of this report, and I urge you all to read it. Women are far more likely than men leaving prison to be homeless at the point of release, as well as before you do go into prison. We should know by now that accessing affordable housing for most people on low incomes, that does mean in the private rental market, is increasingly simply prohibitive. Anglicare every year does this rental affordability snapshot. So it goes out once on one weekend, looks into the newspaper to say this weekend how many properties in the private rental market are actually affordable for people who are living on, for example, the New Start allowance or an income support payment, which is often the experience for women who are leaving prison, certainly in their early days. And this year they found that just 0.6% of private rentals would be affordable in the Greater Sydney and Illawarra region, compared to 1.3% just 12 months earlier. So the situation has become chronic. That's just 25 affordable rental properties. It's non-existent. And there were only 3 affordable properties if you were a single parent, which is often the case for women who are leaving prison. Of course, the huge waiting lists on public housing do not help this, and we continue to struggle to ensure that there is the adequate support and resources for community housing options. The report shows that there are really important vital services that are out there to provide support and assistance, but clearly these services are insufficient. Its key issues raise the fact that there continues to be a lack of services, particularly for people who have been short-term in prison. There's a lack of integration between those services, and that there is a lack of understanding of the complexities, the deep richness of the stories of every individual woman, and that there needs to be, importantly, in the way that the mentoring program of WIPAN has demonstrated, to recognise that we are human beings and we need a personal relationship to be established, the jargon of a caseworker who can get to know you, who can understand you as an individual and make sure that every stepping stone is a strong one for you as you move out of a prison situation into the community. The report really backs up our own findings at the Australian Council of Social Service about how absolutely critical affordable housing is and quality homelessness and housing services. Every year ACOSS runs its own survey nationally. It goes out to community organisations around the country to get that picture of what is happening out there for people who experience poverty and inequality. This year, we found that 81% of housing and homelessness services report that they can't meet client demand. There was a bright light in the report which has shown that with some of the increased funding that has been made available in recent years, we've had a slight reduction in the turnaway rates, but still the situation is urgent and chronic. This year, for the first time, we also asked you as community workers if there was one thing the government could do to help to address poverty and inequality in Australia, what would it be? And over 60% put at the top housing. So you are bang on the money in focusing on this really important issue. I think it's so important to recognise that there is a real cultural shift that is required in Australia in recognising that when it comes to addressing poverty, if you want to use the term social exclusion, or the protection of human rights, that at the heart of it we require support for civil society organisations who place people who have had the experience at the core of the work. This continues to be, in my experience, still a relatively unique way of going about providing, in quotes, social services. So I applaud WIPAN for that ethos and the way that you have designed your work. I think this discussion paper again is a demonstration of making sure that women with the experience of being in prison are all over it as a voice and at the heart of it. I think that the fact that you have designed your approach in this way is the reason that you have such stunning success in providing the support that you do to women who are leaving prison. The statistics don't always speak volumes, but they do in this case, with 82% of women successfully, once leaving prison, not having returned, with the support that has been provided by your organisation. I urge, it was great, Catherine, for you to identify all the parliamentarians in the room. I certainly urge all decision makers to recognise that it is your responsibility to be enablers, to be supporters, and to applaud and provide ongoing support for this really important work. Treating people with dignity, providing them with relationships of support, of encouragement, and strength is absolutely crucial, and your work shows that it is absolutely achievable to provide real change life experiences for women who have been in prison. I urge all levels of government to look at the evidence, to invest in what really works, and I wish you all the best in implementing the recommendations in this very powerful discussion paper, and to continue to grow with strength so that everybody can enjoy their most fundamental human rights, including the right to have a safe roof over your head and to live with dignity. Thank you very much.